Hello, welcome to Setting Up Your Palette Part 2. My name is Eric, and today we're going to be talking about mixing our paint directly on our palette. If you've watched the first Setting Up Your Palette video, you should already have your palette set up as far as having the underlayer of moisture and a piece of palette paper on top. I'm going to be using this. If you have a regular piece of paper, that's fine too. When I'm working here, there are some things to see here. I have some palette knives. I have my paint, I have a brush, a towel, and some water. It's just a nasty water container, but it's just clean water in there. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my paint ready on my palette. For this first painting, it is a monochromatic painting. So the color that you are picking, monochromatic is mono 1. The color you're picking, I recommend either doing a dark blue or a violet. If you think about a value scale, the darkest value of your painting is going to be this unmixed hue, directly out of the tube. So here we go. I'm going to take a little bit of Windsor Violet, and I'm going to add it to my palette here. Come closer. And then, as I said, I don't really like mixing paint too much. But I have a golden white here. It's also kind of similar to a Winsor & Newton, but it's in a tube or in a jar. It's a little bit different. So I'm just going to take a palette knife and pull this out as well. So because it's a two-color painting, there's going to be obviously many different tints of that color. I'm going to put them on two different sides and then sort of just wipe this clean. Now, when we mix paint, we never mix paint with a brush, especially on the palette. You can mix little bits of paint, but especially at the beginning stages of setting up a palette, it should all be with our palette knife. So when I'm doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm prepping a medium tone that I'm going to be using on my canvas, my raw canvas here. It's gesso, but just a blank canvas here, that I'm going to prime the canvas. It's easier to start from a medium value and then build light and darker value from the centralized value than working just from a white background, especially with a dark blue or dark violet. The transparency of those hues is fairly low, so it's hard to cover up very bright white under a pure dark value of purple. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a little bit of white, put it in the center. A little bit of purple, put it in the center. Put a little bit more of purple here. It's about 50-50, depending on what you're mixing. And then I'm going to start mixing this color. When I mix, I try and just do small circles. Then you'll notice that there are little areas of color that I still want to work out. Many painters will say that you should not mix your color 100%. You should leave a few of these in there. It makes a more natural transition when you're mixing tones. For this, it doesn't really matter. You want to mix it almost all the way, and then you want to clean off that palette knife. Something about the palette knife, it is metal. Hopefully you got a wood stem. If not, it could be a plastic stem, that's fine. Sometimes this will break a little bit earlier. You want to keep this clean. Even if you rub this as much as you can on here, you'll still have a little bit of paint here no matter what. All I do is take the rag, pinch, and then just pull it through. Just make sure that you get most of it off, because it's a nice tool to have, and you do most of your mixing with this tool. Okay, we will go over more mixing and more specifics as we dive further into this painting, but for now, we have our darkest value, we have our lightest value, and we have a medium value. We're going to now take that medium value, and we're going to paint it on the entire canvas here. So I have a 2-inch brush. On your supply list, it was a 1-inch was required, a 2-inch is optional. The 2-inch does make this job a little bit easier, but here we go. With my water ready, I'm going to take and load my brush. To load a brush, I'm trying to get paint on both sides of the bristles. From here, I can get a nice even coat. And I'm trying to keep my brush stem in this direction. If you sort of flatten it out like this direction, more paint gets loaded onto the canvas. So when you have it at almost a 90-degree angle from the canvas, that's the easiest way to get a nice thin layer of paint. And that's what we're going for, a nice thin layer, guys. We do not want this to be very thick. In fact, any sort of textural elements that this adds is going to be a negative thing because it's going to change the painting that goes over it. And we want this to just help us. We want this to make our painting jobs easier. The other thing is that if there's a little speckling, the canvas has a little bit of texture. You'll notice that as I'm loading the canvas, there's little bits of speckling. If you grab just the littlest bit of water, don't even push to the bottom of the water container, just a little bit off the top, that will clean up for you a little bit easier. And don't be scared to put a little bit of force into your brush. Canvas is pretty malleable. It's going to be okay. So I'm just continuing to add. I'm making sure that I'm not putting too much paint on my brush at one time. A little bit of water here. Too much paint is a problem. Once again, then you develop texture. You notice that I'm putting on a thin layer, doing wide brush strokes. Sort of a weird lip here. I usually work with a little bit of a thicker canvas. This easel's set up for. But even if I'm doing small marks and trying to fill, at the end I always want to do larger brush strokes to flatten out the space. Once again, little speckling doesn't matter. All of this is just a base coat. We're going to paint over all of this. But you want the majority of it covered with this medium value. You can always come a little bit early with that water as well. But then it plays with a little bit of opacity. Just be careful with the water. Don't add too much. It's very easy to add too much water. And then you have drips everywhere, and it's a huge pain. Nothing good. Moving all the way down. So I haven't finished, but you get the idea. You're moving all the way down. As you're filling the space, it doesn't really matter your brush strokes, but at the end, you want to pull longer brush strokes for a flat development of paint. So we're going to do this all the way through. We are then going to wait for it to dry. Now remember, acrylic paint takes anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes to dry. A nice thin coat like this will be pretty quick, maybe 10-15 minutes. You can actually already see little bits up here drying. Maybe probably hard on the camera, but you can see it. Once this dries, which won't take long, but we do want it to be completely dry, we are going to sketch our thumbnail sketch that we have decided in the earlier stages, the most successful thumbnail sketch, directly onto the canvas. So we're going to have a ground. It will be totally dry. We will then take a pencil and sketch directly on top of this to add all of the compositional details that we're looking for. Remember, you're going to be using your thumbnail sketches as well as your still life, as well as a picture of your still life. I think all three of those things are beneficial to having a more successful composition and more successful painting all around.